We were at Survivor Series, or I was at Survivor Series this past Saturday night with Heel to the Face, and I was telling Brandon off air here that I want to talk a lot of Survivor Series outside of just those who watch it on TV because I was there this past Saturday, and a few things that were worth noting being there. As you might have heard, Triple H did the press conference post Survivor Series, and he touted that it was a sold out TD Garden for Survivor Series. And I know, the internet, especially too, the Wikipedias, I always see next to every attendance, next to every event is always like disputed. And I'm not here to count anybody in the crowd because I do not know the numbers. Capacities are what they tell me capacities are. Attendance are what they tell me attendances are. But Triple H, he touted that this was the most successful Survivor Series in history, the most watched Survivor Series in history. He touted that it was the highest revenue Survivor Series in history, and he touted it was the highest revenue for any WWE event in TD Garden history.
Wow.
And that goes back to WrestleMania 14. Obviously, that was at the same venue. But I will say probably the difference is, and you know it. I mean, you know it even if you're not a wrestling fan. Prices of things go up. I'm not going to come here and say that there was more people in the crowd at this event than there was WrestleMania 14. WrestleMania 14 had the small entranceway, and pretty much the whole place was sold out. So there was probably more people in the stadium for WrestleMania 14 for sure. But, well, the average ticket price nowadays, if I sell one ticket at $1 million or I sell 10 tickets at $500, the one ticket for $1 million is still more money. So it's kind of, when he says highest revenue, obviously meaning that ticket prices were higher for this event than probably that of WrestleMania back in 1998.
And the third-party market, too. I remember you and I were talking about it last week because I know you were on the fence about going because you weren't sure about how you felt about what you're going to spend for ticket prices. And I saw that you went, so I was like, okay, the prices must have come down a little bit, but overall, the third-party market for tickets, that was pretty high last time I checked.
Yeah, no, and it stayed pretty high. I mean, obviously the day of it went down a little bit, and I was telling Brandon off the air here, and they added more seats, and that's not a Triple H. Triple H said that in the press conference that they added more seats until they couldn't find any more places to put people under the configuration. Obviously, they weren't going to take down the stage or do anything like that, but that is true. And I was there. I was at the box office because the day of the show, I did not have seats, and I was curious, what was available, what was popping up, because things were popping up at the last minute as they were adding seats. They did add. They already had obstructed view seats. I think they have them for most events, especially those that are sold out, like this one was for months. And they added even more. They added even higher rows of seats that could see essentially over the stage and around the stage and things like that. And that's true. They added them. They were about $50 after fees and stuff. I did not get one of those seats because, I did travel all that way and I did not want to get the worst of the worst seat. But the average seat for something that wasn't obstructed was over $100 a ticket. And the place was completely full, like I said, and like Triple H said. So I don't contest that at all. And for those who contest that because they weren't there, and maybe, obviously if you're not there, you only see the TV side, but it was full. It was as full as a TD Garden could be. And it had I obviously not going to say this was a WrestleMania vibe, but it had very close, and it felt like a Big Four event. I will say it's strange that WWE hosts a lot of these Big Four events like the Survivor Series and doesn't do more with them. And what I mean by that is that SmackDown and Raws are not in Boston. And that's strange to me because billboards, banners all over Boston, Fenway Park area, obviously by the arena. In Quincy Market, they had the Survivor Series store. And one of my favorite things in the whole world is going to these big events when they have like a store set up. And people who aren't wrestling fans or are just familiar with WWE on the level of what it is, to see it when a big event comes to town. Because, I don't know the difference between monster trucks and the monster truck Super Bowl. I don't know the difference between, a basketball game locally that you would attend versus a basketball game, which is for the world championship that's bringing people from all over the world into town. So when it comes to WWE, people are familiar with what it is, but it comes to Boston just like anywhere else a lot. So to see them kind of wondering why there's a store all of a sudden in famous Quincy Market, and to see why there's people lined up around the corner for a WWE store. No, it was more than just a singular event. And I can imagine going to the Bruins or the Celtics games the night before, or the night after, they probably had the same questions because there was a lot of banners around the arena, and not the banners in which are like on the electronic boards that go away. They had an ice sculpture with the Survivor Series logo out front of the arena. They had all the flooring leading up to the arena with those big like vinyl stickers that said Survivor Series War Games. They had balloons. They had banners all up and down the streets that I imagine were there for more than just the day, with all the wrestlers on them saying, Boston welcomes the Survivor Series. So it had a big time feel. And the reason I wanted to talk solely pretty much about Survivor Series and some things other than just the results of the match is that one thing Triple H, they brought up during the press conference post Survivor Series was people were asking him, one, is this the end of the traditional Survivor Series matches? Are we never going to see those again? And is WarGames going to be a tradition at Survivor Series? And Triple H pretty much said, I don't know for either. And I'll say this much, and this is where I'll get your intake, Brandon, on this. I think Survivor Series was such a success this year, not because of the War Games match specifically, but because of the War Games match representing WWE using the Survivor Series to freshen things up. And that means, and in my eyes, I personally think that WWE should not commit to the War Games match being a Survivor Series staple, just like it shouldn't commit to an Elimination Chamber match or a Survivor Series match itself. It should commit to Survivor Series being an event in which is going to be looked at uniquely every year.
Yeah, and I will say this, and you know me, I'm a huge Survivor Series fan. It's one of my favorite shows of the year, aside from the Rumble and WrestleMania, of course. I always put it's my third favorite. I even like it more than SummerSlam. That's just how I've always felt about it. But I think the War Games, the whole War Games concept there's a couple layers to it. It was just a fresh coat of paint, which is always good because then you're freshening things up, like you said. But it also, you're getting more eyeballs because if you're seeing, if people are seeing commercials for it or especially in Boston, around town, they're seeing this and then maybe they look into it. They're like, oh, this is not your normal Survivor Series. So this is the War Games version? Huh, what's that? And that might have gotten a few more people to maybe, jump on the Peacock network or even go to the arena and catch the show. So to me, it was kind of a combination of things. And I will say, I don't think Triple H wants to, he doesn't want to tip his hand one way or the other. He kind of wants to leave it and let it marinate, because it was a great show. We'll get to the match card in a minute, but it was a great show from start to finish. And like you said, the revenue was through the roof. I mean, it was a very, very profitable show, and it was a very popular show. So let's let this simmer a little bit, like a good crock pot recipe, I don't know, like a pork tenderloin or something. So that's what you have to do. You gotta let this thing marinate out. I think Triple H didn't tip his hand for a reason. I think they already know what they're going to do. I really do. WWE is one of those companies sometimes we may be critical of them, but they are forward thinking. I do think they already have an idea of what they want to do. They may do some minor tweaking here and there, but I think overall, I think that there's the concept of, I don't know if it's going to be War Games again for Survivor Series, but I don't see why they wouldn't, I guess, because it's been so successful. If I had to bet on it because of the success, I would say they're going to make this a staple. You can't ignore the numbers. And you know me, I'm a dollar and cents kind of guy, and I look at the numbers. When Triple H is boasting the numbers like that, you have to at least run it back at least one more time and see what happens. That's my take.
I mean, that's obviously what they did with Rock Cena, and the problem I guess I have with that, and I'm not against them running it back one more time, but I guess, like I've said, is got to keep it fresh because everything will get stale. The War Games will get stale. And one of the big things he brought up during the press conference is, and we've talked about this before on the show, obviously in one episode entirely, they did bring up the fact of getting rid of some of these gimmick pay-per-views and essentially how they have found a way to make Hell in a Cell stale. And Triple H, what he said during the press conference is that Hell in a Cell is what he thinks is a match that is for a blow off. You can challenge someone at the end of a feud for Hell in a Cell, what we've always said, and how it doesn't essentially work as a pre-planned match. It works as something that is unplanned, that is something you challenge someone for. He says, though, the Elimination Chamber and Money in the Bank, where they're different than that, as in essentially why I think he's kind of defending them as their own pay-per-views, is the only way they are going to happen is if, they stay, by a general manager making them, or because one individual can't challenge another person to the Elimination Chamber. You can't challenge someone to Money in the Bank. They've got to stay like Royal Rumble style, in the sense that they're pre-planned, like this WarGames we saw where Triple H said there's going to be WarGames, and then the people fit in.
Matches. I don't mind the Money in the Bank. I love Money in the Bank. I like Elimination Chamber as well. I don't think having them as pay-per-views is a good idea. I think what they should do, and I mean they're not going to take my word for it, but kind of like where I would go is make it into at least I would say, at least for the Elimination Chamber, you could probably do both and get away with it. Is you have it as kind of almost like a tournament, so to speak, where and then the final grouping of whoever made it to the finals, so to speak, then they get to face off in an Elimination Chamber or in a Money in the Bank situation. Now, the Hell in a Cell, I agree with Triple H 100% on that. I like that as like a match, not a pay-per-view, because that's the best way to blow off anything.
And we've seen Hell in a Cell outside of the pay-per-view. Remember, just recently, it was Edge and was it Edge and Finn Balor, right? Edge and Finn Balor inside Hell in a Cell at the Saudi Arabia pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And Undertaker, Shane McMahon at WrestleMania years ago.
We don't need it as a pay-per-view. You don't need it as a pay-per-view. You can, like we've talked about, I know you brought it up before on a previous episode, like a No Way Out, you could still incorporate a No Way Out type pay-per-view and at least have maybe the main event as your Hell in a Cell match, where it's this huge rivalry that's been building for a good amount of time, and this is the final match. This is where it all blows out. And here's the thing, not to get too far into AEW, but that's what AEW just did at their recent pay-per-view with Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy. That's the perfect way to blow that whole rivalry out the door, and then they can move on to different competitors. I think that's what they need to do going forward.
I think one thing Survivor Series should, I guess, stick to. One thing they should stick to, and this is why maybe we'll see I'd like to see the Elimination Chamber maybe getting rid of as a pay-per-view, and then maybe place the Survivor Series not as a tradition. I don't want to see anything placed as a tradition. I want to see, maybe Survivor Series this year, WarGames next year, Survivor Series the year after, and that kind of makes it so that even Elimination Chamber, we don't need to see them every year. I remember being younger and we'd go a whole calendar year without Hell in a Cell. We'd see Hell in a Cell in 99, and then we'd see it, in early 2000. We saw it in late 2000. I think we went all of 2001 without it, and then we saw it middle 2002. The point I'm trying to make is here, I think Survivor Series, one thing they should probably stick to is the name itself, Survivor Series. And what I mean by that is whatever match they decide to pick, and every year it should be different, whether it's the 5-on-5 tags, whether it's WarGames, whether it's Elimination Chamber, is some sort of Survivor theme. Obviously, one-on-one, it doesn't give that off. And I feel like the Elimination Chamber, though, gave off who will be the last survivor. I think WarGames, even though it's not an elimination match, gave off that who will be the survivor, whether it's Team Survivor. So it's just essentially it's a multi-man match, multi-man teams.
But you also can bring it up with the WarGames part of it. You can bring it. You can do the Survivor part of it too, because they were, even the broadcasters, even the Michael Coles and the Corey Graves of the world, were selling it oh my God, can they make it to the there's a 2-on-1 or
survive? Yeah.
Can they survive this 2-on-1 onslaught until their teammate can come in and kind of bail them out? That's another portion of that Survivor Series kind of it's kind of got that little jest to it, I guess.
Keep this pay-per-view as just something that is unique, something that every year you're not going to see the same thing.
And how about those spots? How about the spots too? I mean, I know not everybody's crazy about crazy spots. I like a great story, but I don't mind having some cool spots. And I think the spots in that type of match are better than your regular squared circle. That's just
Now,
how I
I will
look.
say I brought somebody with me who has only ever seen 2 wrestling shows, and he's been to both of them. I don't know how much wrestling he's seen outside of them, but he's seen a SmackDown and he's seen an AEW Dynamite. So I brought him to WarGames. So this was his first ever watching a WWE pay-per-view. And right from the get-go, he said, and I can't deny here, the women's match beat the men's match. And was the most entertaining match when it comes to the most spots on the card. What do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, Io Sky doing what she did on the top there, that was sick. I mean, like she just moonsaults off the top, like that was really cool. I mean, I thought both War Games matches were good, but I would say if I had to tip it one way or the other, I would say from a spot perspective, women's match by far. From a story perspective, telling a great story, the men's definitely had a better story, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, and the whole Sami Zayn thing. Obviously, he's not familiar with the story, so just watching it as a match,
Yeah,
he's going to say,
if you don't know, if you're not following it along, like you said, he's not, he doesn't go to a lot of shows or doesn't really pay attention to the product. So, like, from that perspective, if you're just showing up, never seen a wrestling match in your life, yeah, you're going to go with that match because of it was great spots. The fans like us that we watch it on a regular basis, you're seeing the storylines like, okay, is Sami Zayn going to do this to Kevin Owens? And you saw what happened. Like it just the whole thing played out. And the best part about that is it was, and obviously it followed up on Raw where it's for now. I mean, it never ends between Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. We all know that. It's been like that for years. For now, they're not going to be dealing with each other. They're going to be going in their own directions, it seems like.
it's crazy, and we brought this up before too, but I'm bringing it up again, is that Roman Reigns, obviously he didn't defend the championship at Survivor Series. His last championship defense in North America was July the 30th at SummerSlam against Brock Lesnar. He's had 2 defenses since, Logan Paul and Drew McIntyre. Both of those were out of North America, and clearly, so apparently Logan Paul in November the 5th in Crown Jewel will be his last defense for 2022, and probably his last defense until the Royal Rumble. But a lot of people who are not Roman Reigns fans, I don't get it. I didn't think that this would be possible, that somebody would be a champion for so long and there would be matches like this where the championship isn't even on the line, but yet the tickets were selling. And that's another thing Triple H should look at here, is that this pay-per-view essentially had no championship matches other than a few small ones, right? This was like 90s wrestling where people were just paying to see the wrestlers. They didn't need to see like a championship on the line, and they were paying top dollar to just see the matches and the stories that were going with the matches, and didn't need, the world title on the line, didn't need somebody becoming the number 1 contender for the world title, didn't need anything in which when the pay-per-view was over, a crowning of anybody was going to happen. It was just good storytelling that drew, I think, the largest gate in North America outside of WrestleMania.
I'm curious also too from a revenue perspective. I'm curious to know how. I know I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can pretty much assume anything that the Bloodline puts out for merch is probably selling like hotcakes. I'm curious to see what the number was at Survivor Series, because Roman Reigns has got to be making so much money, and I bet you the rest of the Bloodline is in the same boat where they're making so much money off the merch sales. But here's the issue that I noticed, though. There's like this report going out there that WWE is not giving these big bonuses anymore. I don't know if you heard about that, but I feel like Roman Reigns is still getting a big cut, don't you think?
I mean, I would imagine that you're right. The bonuses are, and they've talked about this now a decade ago when the WWE Network came into existence, of what these bonuses would look like, especially like the pay-per-view bonuses, because of buy rates themselves. And now there's no buy rates. Obviously, everyone just watches on these networks. So nobody gets any bonuses because of that. But when it comes to Roman Reigns, I'm not going to deny that he is probably doing very well. I can tell you from in the arena standpoint, again, if you didn't know who the good guys or the bad guys were, you'd think the Bloodline was the good guys, because they got the biggest pop outside of probably Kevin Owens, not even Drew McIntyre, but probably outside of Kevin Owens when it comes to that team. He's the only one that got a decent pop for the essential good guys, and the Bloodline got the big pop.
So let me ask you this: so for being there in the arena, did Kevin Owens get the biggest pop of the whole like everybody, or was it Bloodline?
Of the Drew McIntyre Brawling Brutes team, he got the biggest pop, but the Bloodline got the biggest pop of any of those people in the match. Good guy, bad guy. The Bloodline got the biggest pop. They were the ones clearly being rooted for. Sami Zayn, probably, if you want to say individual, he probably got the biggest pop.
Oh, he absolutely did, and I don't know if you saw the comments from the dead man himself, the Undertaker. He gave Sami Zayn a lot of love recently about like what he's been doing, and he said he's pretty much saying that Sami Zayn is this is the best he's ever seen Sami Zayn, and I think it's kind of obvious,
yes.
isn't it? It is obvious. The guy Sami Zayn, and you know me, we've been doing this for so long. You can even go back and look at old shows of ours, and you know that I've never been a big Sami Zayn fan. I'm just keeping it real. But I give credit where credit is due, and Sami Zayn he's must watch TV right now. And it was for a minute I'm like, okay, I can't, there's no way, like Sami Zayn, like he can't be in the Bloodline, right? Like no way. And the way he's he's been embraced by the tribal chief Roman Reigns. And then eventually the rest of the bloodline. It's to me, Sami Zayn. This right here is going to make him a lot of money when it comes to whenever his next contract is. I don't know what his contract terms are, but whenever he's gonna get a renewal, or he might be in a bidding war, maybe he goes somewhere else for bigger money. Because right now, Sami Zayn's doing some damn good things, and I think outside of Roman Reigns, he's probably the next big thing right now.
I'm hearing rumors that Sami Zayn is going to go off for the belt against Roman Reigns early 2023, either at the Rumble or Elimination Chamber. Most likely Elimination Chamber is what I'm hearing, and that it's going to be Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos for the tag belts come WrestleMania. I like those ideas, but I also don't like those ideas if I know about them ahead of time. It's kind of spoiling it a little bit.
Yeah, can we just leave it? Can we leave the Bloodline be for a bit? Like this is
just leave anything in which you think is going to happen in a year, or try to get into too much stuff. Like I like those matches. I don't want to know about those matches happening ahead of time. I kind of wish they don't happen now, just to prove.
And here's the thing too: you can't blow it off too quickly too, because look at what happened at the show itself. At the end of the match, Jey Uso, who's been like the curmudgeon of the whole bloodline when it comes to embracing Sami Zayn, you get the big pop when they get the big hug, and then on Raw this past week, he's defending he's like, that's my guy, to Kevin Owens, like, oh, you want to go? Like, and by the way, that was a good match on Raw as well, but that it just seeing the progression from where we started with the bloodline and then working with Sami Uso in now, I gotta tell you, it's some of the most riveting television in the wrestling business that I've seen in a long time.
One thing I will say, and we've talked about this before, and there was a great example of it on Saturday. We've talked about one. Not a big fan of the post-show press conferences that AEW does. Don't know why WWE essentially did it. And about the whole kayfabe kind of dying a quick death before it has a chance to soak in. Both of those happened during the press conference for Survivor Series, in which, and this is why, if you're going to have a press conference, just do the Triple H thing and then be done with it. I don't need to talk to Sami Zayn or Becky Lynch or anybody. So the press conference started with Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, and they started talking essentially in work mode about how Becky decided she was going to come back. And she said, I was attending a wedding and I was in Ireland and I was going to attend the wedding of my friend, and Bianca called me and asked me if I wanted to be on her team. So I dropped everything and I came here and I joined the team so I could be in WarGames. Not even like 20 minutes later, when Triple H then does the shoot real life interview about the success of the show and, the money it makes, and the outside of character interview, they then ask him the same question about Becky Lynch, and Triple H then reveals that we've been in talk with Becky for a while. We've been telling Becky we want her to come back, and we've just been looking for a good fit. And it was the Survivor Series WarGames that we saw was the best fit. Again, this is 20 minutes apart. Like, she just gave you a kayfabe answer, and we can't even get through the press conference before they're already telling us the magic behind the scenes.
Leave it be.
This is why we don't need a press conference. Becky Lynch and Bianca, Keep them out. Either you're going to have the shoot press conference thing was fine to tout the success of Survivor Series. That made Survivor Series seem very big. It talked about the numbers and it talked about the attendance. That I think was cool because of that aspect and because he came out publicly instead of just being on these, talking in a quarterly meeting about their revenue. He came out publicly post Survivor Series to talk about the success of the event. We didn't need the kayfabe characters though in the press conference. I don't like kayfabe characters in the press conference. We can wait till Raw. We can hear what Becky Lynch has to say on Monday Night Raw and all these people. It's a 3-hour show. Obviously, between now and Royal Rumble, there's lots of Raws to chat with and do interviews and backstage, reports and stuff like that. So just do the Triple H part because clearly Bianca and Becky come out and they say something in character, and then literally before the press conference itself is over, they're just like, didn't they do great in the press conference? Yeah, they're great characters. Like already blowing it. Like it'd be literally like if we kick off Raw with Becky talking as a character, and by 9:15 she's already talking in non-character terms about how great that story was she just did 5 minutes ago.
I agree with you majority of that with the press conferences. If you're gonna do it like the way that AEW did with MJF, I'm okay with that kind of press conference, but I also think MJF is just super talented and he can make anything really good. So it kind of comes down to like knowing your talent and knowing what they can or cannot do. But overall, I feel like no.
If AEW did a press conference where MJF and Tony Khan were at it, and then they were like feuding because of the story, and MJF is talking about Tony Khan's a bad promoter, and then he's like, I'm gonna fine you, stop talking bad about the business, doing the whole Austin McMahon thing, and then they both walk off, and then 10 minutes later, Tony Khan, the actual Tony Khan, comes on, and then he starts going, wasn't that great? You believed me as a Vince McMahon there, huh? You thought MJF was really mad at me, and like just breaks character in the same press conference, like a Monday morning. Yeah. It's like Monday morning quarterbacking, except for you're doing it while it's still Sunday.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a good look overall. It really isn't. But I mean, I guess MJF, the way AEW did it in that situation, I thought it was done well. But to your point with that press conference where Triple H contradicts essentially what was just said like 20 minutes ago, that's not a good look. If you're going to do press conferences, you cannot do it that way. You need to have you can even have somebody as talented as, I don't know, like The Miz or Roman Reigns do some sort of press conference, but you don't need Triple H there, and they can just say, yep, this is Sam Uso.
Everybody needs to be a character, or everybody needs to be out of character. You can't have them
one way or the other.
The same,
you can't mix it up.
Press conference. We talked obviously a couple weeks ago about the death of Austin Theory, and Triple H said he was out to die about 2 weeks ago, and just like he knew what he was doing about this whole thing. He kind of called out, us and everybody else who essentially left him for dead, and said, "Boy, he was dead, and now he's alive and better than ever." And I have to agree. I did prematurely talk about the death of Austin Theory because in a matter of a quick week and a half, it seems like he has come back from the dead. He is the U.S. champion, and he is more entertaining than he has been in a while.
Yeah, I will say this. You were more critical of his death than I was. I'm just saying. I mean, I was like, what do we do next? But I also came out before the pay-per-view and we did our pre-pay-per-view show. And I did say Austin Theory was going to win. So I kind of had this feeling that they were building this up a little bit. And I will tell you, like, at first, when the initial issue where he dropped the Money in the Bank and it was just a terrible cash and everything, like, we were both kind of like, okay, what are we doing with this guy? Like, why this is the terrible cash in, what are we doing? And Triple H, the genius that he is, he got us pretty good. And I will say this, and I agree 100%. This is the Austin Theory we've been waiting for a long time. And when I say a long time, he's been in the business a long time, and the kid's only in his 20s, for Pete's sake. I mean, he's one of the youngest up and coming stars of this business. I mean, Austin Theory is going to be a guy we will be talking about in the next decade as one of the premier attractions for WWE. That's how talented he is.
Let's just see where they take this, because if you remember, last time we were in attendance for when he became the U.S. champion last time, and then they skyrocketed that to becoming, winner of Money in the Bank, and then it went back down to where now his essential accomplishing something is becoming the U.S. champion, which he's already been this year. Let's see if this time around it actually springboard him, because like I said, it sprungboard him to Money in the Bank, and then kind of test toying with Roman Reigns for a minute. Let's see where the U.S. title that takes him this time. If we can get past just the toying with Roman Reigns and actually get himself into that main event picture.
Well, here's the thing though, his character, from a character standpoint, like, this is the best character we've seen of Austin Theory. I think he like, it seems more natural to him, this character, versus anything he's ever done in the past. I feel like this is kind of, and this is how some of the greats do it. It's, yes, you're a performer. You're a part of, it's scripted. We know that. But the best ones are the ones where they mix in their real life personalities to a degree, versus, and mix it with the scripted portion of it. I think we're seeing the Austin Theory that he probably really is outside of, in the real world of things. Just not I'm not saying, he's 100% like that, but it's enough of Austin Theory's personality where I feel like he's more comfortable. I think his promo work has been fantastic, since he's gone over like this new makeover, this fresh coat of paint. I think Austin Theory, I think this is his best work, and I just hope that WWE does not drop the ball with this, because if they can keep this going, the momentum is going to keep moving. And this kid in the next decade, I think, is going to be, I don't want to say he's going to be the next John Cena or anything, but he's going to be pretty darn good in the next decade.
I think that triple threat was match of the night, and one thing they did really well was having everyone in the match seem to be working together at the same time. We're used to those triple threats where it's one-on-one and somebody's off to the side playing dead. But in this case, I mean, in the finish alone, I mean, it's like finisher, and then he does a finisher like simultaneously. Great finish to the triple threat match, utilizing everybody in it. It was like when tag team wrestling's good. Triple threat, they work together really well, and they found a way to make that three people in the same ring seem cool versus just, like I said, awkward. And
they did it the right way, because they made Austin Theory look good. Obviously, that's the obvious point. Bobby Lashley didn't get.
It made everybody look good. Nobody looked bad.
Yeah, no, Bobby Lashley, he looked great. And then Seth freaking Rollins, he took the fall. And I think this is obviously a good thing for him as well, because we're going to see, I think the story between these two is going to play out. It's for a while. I think this to me feels like long-term booking between these two guys.
Definitely. The women's match, that probably was a throwaway, and whoever would have thought this years ago. Ronda Rousey, the hottest thing in wrestling in 2018 when she debuted in WWE, the biggest name, essentially drawing people more than Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns do currently. Well, people are kind of a little tired of her. Of all the matches, that was essentially the quote-unquote bathroom break match of the night. And it was.
We predicted it, though. We predicted that to happen. There's little interest. Unfortunately, there's a little interest in Ronda Rousey these days. It's
not just
unfortunate.
Shotzi. Yeah, it is Ronda Rousey. The interest in her is really waning. Not just as champion, but just in general. People are starting to say that she's not as talented.
I do like Ronda Rousey with Shayna Baszler. I think I don't know how this is going to work with Ronda Rousey going forward, because obviously, like you said, it was probably like the bathroom break of the show kind of, match. But I think if they do it right, this could obviously help Shayna Baszler out. And Shayna Baszler's needed a fresh coat as well. So like this might, I hate to say it this way, but this could be a detriment to Ronda Rousey going forward. But in a way, it could help Shayna Baszler going forward. Shotzi's okay. I'm not a huge Shotzi fan. I think she does okay. I think she's a solid competitor. She definitely wasn't ready for the belt. That's just how I don't think she's more ready than Liv Morgan was, that when Liv Morgan won. No. It would have been a cool surprise, but I don't think Shotzi's ready yet. That's just where I'm at.
Very curious. WWE, obviously, they have about 60 days between now and the Royal Rumble, which is the same distance as if there was no pay-per-view. In fact, I think it's more time. If the Royal Rumble had no pay-per-view between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, I think that would still be essentially less amount of days than we have now between the Royal Rumble. So it's kind of weird going from Survivor Series to the Royal Rumble with like a full 61, 62 days between the pay-per-views. And we're not, unlike WrestleMania, we're not, built. The Royal Rumble doesn't build up, especially too. There's not 2 nights of it. They're not trying to build 16 matches. So it's going to be interesting along the rest of the way as we just get to the Royal Rumble and how they find a way to fill the next 2 months of time.
Let me ask you this. We haven't talked about yet? We haven't talked Finn Balor, AJ Styles.
Finn Balor, AJ Styles. I mean, I think that was a good match. I don't want to say that it was as good as the triple threat match.
Would it go like 20 minutes? It was
about, I think it was about 18 minutes long. It was entertaining. I will say though, I'm not trying to avoid the match, but I think that it just wasn't as good as, like, let's say the triple threat match, for sure.
No, I agree.
WarGames matches were really good as well. It was definitely better than that women's match. But AJ Styles getting his first pay-per-view win in 3 months, his first, I think, singles win in general in 3 months. Big for him. It did kind of ruin it, though, because obviously on a night where a lot of the faces won, it didn't help Finn Balor's character development and the Judgment Day going forward with that, because obviously Rhea Ripley and her team lost, and then Finn Balor lost. So didn't look that great on the night for the Judgment Day in general, in moving them forward.
Let me ask you this. How did you like the limited amount of matches? I think, what did I count, 5 matches?
5 matches, no pre-show matches. I'm a big fan of the no pre-show match. At least, especially they can bring back a pre-show match. I'm not against that, but I like the pre-show not being treated as part of the extended card. I think that's the thing that they've been doing before, where like the pre-show, it's not like Raw, how they've taped matches for main event and nobody cares. Like, they were trying to make matches for the pay-per-view, especially like a WrestleMania, and then they would move them to the pre-show and they would like be on the pre-show. So essentially that's where people got this idea that WrestleMania was 7 hours long, because you had to be there for the pre-show. The Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, one year it'd be the semi-main event, the next year it'd be on the pre-show. The Cruiserweight Championship match you've been looking forward to goes from the main show to the pre-show. So if you're going to have a pre-show match, I'm fine with it being something that's not story related, just a throwaway dark kind of match. But I like that the pay-per-view itself doesn't like extend to the pre-show. Like, we're not having, like, when they had the Raw versus SmackDown matches, some of those matches were on the pre-show. Some of those matches that counted towards the brand supremacy were on the pre-show. So I don't like that. I like the matches just on the pay-per-view that count and that matter. So if you get in the door at 8 o'clock, you didn't miss anything. Not a lot of matches. And what I probably like the most about it is that there's a lot of people who aren't featured on the card. No Matt Riddle, The Miz, no Dexter Lumis, no Johnny Gargano. And to me, I like that, because they've got storylines going on that keep you intrigued to watch Monday Night Raw. There would be a reason for me to go to Monday Night Raw this past Monday, even if I went to Survivor Series, to see some people I haven't seen. Just like we saw at Extreme Rules, the main event had Matt Riddle in it. This pay-per-view, no Matt Riddle at all. And then last pay-per-view, no Roman Reigns. This pay-per-view, Roman Reigns. So it's keeping things fresh, where even though we don't have the 6 pay-per-views a year, like some people would like, if we only have the wrestlers on 6 pay-per-views a year.
You mean me. I'm a 6 pay-per-view a year kind of guy. Yeah. I will say this though. I don't know if you saw, but I don't know if I don't know if you have the exact times on the WarGames matches, but I want to say those matches took up about an hour 15, hour 20 of the show, I felt like.
I know more than that. The first match was about 45 minutes. And then the second match, I think, was about 40 minutes. It started
about
about
an hour and a half
10:15 and ended like 11. So they were both about 45 minutes to 50 minutes each.
That's a good. I mean, that's the kind of war games you like, because you're and I like it because they're bookends. You start with the war games, you end with the war games, then you have everything else in between. It's like a nice sandwich. I thought they booked it really well.
The one thing that's strange about war games, and we'll talk obviously NXT Deadline next week, but it's strange having a match in which you don't really have an objective for the first 40 minutes. I mean, the Royal Rumble is the Royal Rumble the whole time. You're eliminating people the whole time. So it's strange being in a match where the first 40 minutes is you can't even attempt a pinfall or a submission for 40 minutes. It's just strange. You know what I mean? It'd be like watching a basketball game or a football game where you can't score until the fourth quarter. You just gotta like dribble a ball around. You can't go for the hoop until the end. So that's one thing that's strange. It'd be one thing if the match lasted 45 minutes, but they were getting pinfalls throughout. I just don't like that element. War Games is great. I like the idea in the sense of the teams and the cage and the whole 9 yards, but the element of it, like where you don't try going for pinfalls for 45 minutes, makes it kind of like, if you get up and go to the bathroom, you might miss a cool spot, but you're not going to miss a finish, and that because it's
that's what that makes me think now. the one thing that I could see, or what I would like to see added to the War Games match, is maybe you do make it where when you're 2-on-1, you get a chance to cash in, so to speak, and get a quick pinfall. Maybe they can have the highest total points at the end of the War Games. Maybe change it up. Maybe tweak it a little bit. If you're looking for pinfalls or submissions, that could be something you could do where
we've seen that like an Elimination Chamber where somebody gets pinned really quickly and then they get to sit there for 5 minutes waiting for the next guy to come out.
It's not a bad. There's so many ways you can tweak it. That's obviously it's nitpicking because both matches were quality. That's kind of going in the nitpicky portion of it. If you want to make it. What's the perfect match? You know what I mean? But it's
somebody could get brought out from a cage once an eliminate. Like you wrestle like a gauntlet match. When somebody gets eliminated, the next person enters. So you start out 1-on-1. Someone gets the bad guy gets eliminated. Then another person from the bad guy team comes out. The good guy gets eliminated. Another person from the good guy team comes out. Very much like a Survivor Series match in that sense, where it comes down to who's the last one surviving.
And it'd be an interesting concept. I will say though, it was aside from the round on the show were great.
Yeah, no, overall, great pay-per-view. Like I said, not a lot of championships on the line, but still overall good pay-per-view. And I just hope, and Triple H, I hope he takes this with him and he takes all the success that comes from this, especially too that this place was sold out because of wrestling-related reasons. So obviously the investors and the people who have the money involved, who don't care about wrestling, can see that what makes WWE the most successful and what makes them the most money is essentially the best wrestling product. And I know it's more than just wrestling; it's all the hoopla around it. But it's all of that together. And leave Triple H in charge. I know he likes wrestling more than, let's say, Vince McMahon liked the wrestling part. But hey, the sold out place should show those investors. Keep doing what you got to do. Hey, if you want to go have unique sets for every pay-per-view again, do it, because you know what you're doing and you know how to make money. So if that's what you're going to do, trust in Triple H going forward. And I like this. I like the arena being sold out for pay-per-views like they should be. I like it being a hot ticket, and I want all pay-per-views to feel like the pay-per-views did in 2000 when Jim Ross used to kick off the pay-per-view saying, this pay-per-view sold out in just 90 seconds in anticipation for King of the Ring. Well, let's get back to that. Let's get back to that thing where
I think we're getting in the right direction. I think under Triple H's direction, I think that's where we're going. And again, the Survivor Series was fantastic. Pretty much everything that Triple H has done since he's taken over, he's really freshened up the product and he's made it more watchable. And you know what? It might bring back some people that maybe were waning a little bit. Like, okay, Vince McMahon needs to freshen things up. There could have been some people that were on the fence about maybe not watching some wrestling for a while. And I have a feeling that Triple H brought a lot of these people back because of the way things have been built. It's and the other thing is too, you also have another a competitor in AEW, which at this point as a wrestling fan, there's other obviously Ring of Honor is part of the AEW family. Impact. There's so many great wrestling organizations right now. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan.
I'll just leave it at this. In the last week alone, I have seen them take the 316 trademark. And you want to talk about making money. I've seen in the last week alone them sell shirts for Thanksgiving 316. I saw that at Monday Night Raw last week. They actually were advertising it as Gobble 316, but the shirt said Thanksgiving 316. So I guess the marketeer and the shirt themselves, those people didn't talk to each other. And then at Survivor Series, I saw, and you're more of a Boston guy than me, Townie 316. I guess that's an inner city term. And obviously knowing and watching Good Will Hunting and knowing all the Boston stereotypes, Southie 316
Southie, yep.
was another shirt that they were selling. So they definitely are getting the most out of 316. It's advanced to more than just the city names. It's now the city nicknames. And I imagine if I was to attend an event between now and the end of December, you could probably get a Christmas 316 shirt at something.
And,
So
it's inside baseball to fans that maybe not know the Boston area, where a lot of people may not know what Southie is. You know what I mean? So I think it's cool. It's cool inside baseball, and people are like, "Huh, what the heck's this mean?" I think it's cool. One last thing I do want to add. Speaking of Boston, I don't know if you saw, but the boss, Sasha Banks, was in Boston for a Celtics game recently. So I'll leave you with this.
She was at the TD Garden, last night for the Celtics Heat. I saw that.
Let me ask you. I'll leave you with this. I know. WWE was in Boston this week. The boss was in Boston in her hometown. Do we see a reunion with the boss in WWE in 2023? Yes or no?
Yes. But clearly they're not that close yet. And they're not as close as some fans might think they are, because they were just in Boston and she wasn't there. So I think if they were that close, they wouldn't have dropped the ball in that sense, that she would have obviously been at that show. So the fact that she wasn't at that show makes me think that they're not probably even in talks currently at this time.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think eventually, the T's will get crossed, the I's will get dotted, and you'll see the boss back in the industry, or in WWE, I should say. And it'll be great, because right now I feel like it's Becky and Bayley carrying the women's brand right now.
All right. Next week, we're going to talk NXT Deadline, a whole nother match type that's probably even more confusing because it's brand new than the Survivor Series was.